Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Today, I have the honor of hosting a guest whose insights have touched the lives of many. Bradie Hansen is a therapist who has been a strong advocate for the use of art as a transformative medium to navigate grief. She's also the co-author of the book, The Long Grief Journey: How Long-Term Unresolved Grief Can Affect Your Mental Health and What to Do About It. In her own life, Bradie has found a profound connection to fiber arts as a means of self-expression and grounding after going through her own traumatic experience. From spinning yarn to weaving, she found the therapeutic power of creating with her hands to be transformative. Welcome, Bradie, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Traci, for having me.
Can you share with us your journey as a therapist and how you discovered the therapeutic potential of art in helping you to navigate grief?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, and I think the real moment, that the time when my world as a psychologist merged with my world as a fiber crafter and artist happened when I discovered hand spun yarn for the first time. I guess that's discovering it happens for the first time. So, but when I saw hand spun yarn, um I had never seen it before, and I didn't know anything about really making yarn from, wool off the sheep into. And so when I saw that, it first changed my, what I made, how I made things, how I thought about the materials I was using, my place, the fact that so much of the yarn was coming from sheep around Vermont, which is where I live. And, you know, there was just something so moving about that. After using it for a while, then I decided to start spinning, or I wanted to really learn how to spin my own yarn. And it was that process, um, of once I got the hang of spinning, I realized that, especially after this one time in particular, that I felt incredibly peaceful after a good, probably an hour or so of spinning. And it was noticeable. It felt like I had just had the deepest meditation sit that I'd ever had. And I remember thinking that night, there has to be something to this. What I can't believe how good I feel. And and I remember having a kind of that spark of an idea of, can I bring these two worlds of mine together? Like, I want to be able to do that. And serendipitously, I literally think it was the next day, I happened to be thumbing through the magazine that came with my spinning wheel. And in that magazine was an article by Anne Futterman Collier, who wrote a book about using textile arts in therapy with women. And I was like, oh. And so there was my connection, my bridge. And so it all started from there. I was able to reach out to her and start doing my own research and kind of build a bridge between these two worlds. And
Nice.
it's it's been a whole other journey since then.
I know for myself when I went through a traumatic event and I was experiencing grief, I was drawn to knitting, and I don't know why because no one in my family knits or is a crafter at all. And so I got into knitting and eventually spinning and weaving because it made me feel really grounded. And it gave me a sense of connection to community, not only with the people that I was knitting or spinning with, but also to a community or a lineage of people who created using fiber. And I know that you're a part of a community of fiber artists back east. Can you tell us how belonging to a community like this supports people through the grief process?
Yeah, I think it's really organic. Um, I mean, you can you can use you can be very thoughtful about using fiber art and craft as a way to help yourself through grief, but I also think there's something that happens really naturally when you're within a community that is so, it's just use the word grounded, and it it's so grounded. You're involved with materials, you're involved with people who are making something, helping each other, participating. You can talk, you can not talk, you can share what's going on with you, you cannot. It's just so I think there's just something really the way I think of it, at least the way it worked in my life, is that I didn't know this was happening, but it's like the ground was getting um made underneath my feet as I was figuring out how to move forward. Um, and it's like the more you want to do something or learn something or talk about something, or you hear someone talk about something that's relevant to you, it's like more ground comes in front of you that you're like, oh, I can walk in that direction or I can walk in that direction. So that's kind of how it's been for me. Now, as a therapist, I can offer um, specific opportunities for people to use in their grief process, and so there's this other more clear road, but yeah, I hope that answers that question. It's kind of both. It can be really directed, but it's just also, I think, a natural part of being with people who are engaged in something that they love.
Yeah.
All the
I
best
know that
parts come out right when we're doing something we love.
yeah, I know that we spoke before about um, your loss and your loss of your mother, and how when you became part of this fiber community, um, they served. It wasn't like you just came out and started talking about your loss, but eventually that community served uh, as a place that you could feel safe and connected. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Definitely in the immediate after, I mean, honestly, for the first few years after my mom died, I really noticed that I could either be with people who I was very close to, in terms of like, like immediate family, really close friends, kind of like active support people who knew me really well. I could either be with people like that, or I could be in places where, like, with my weaving community or teaching. I was still teaching fiber arts at our local school. I hosted a camp here at my house, and I was able to do that. But there was this other space in between, like kind of like the social world that involves a lot of, like, I say small talk, and I don't mean that in a diminishing way, but just sort of the I don't know, the sort of yucking it up that you can do. I lost my ability to do that. And I found certain kinds of social events to be really, really difficult. Um, so interestingly, I think my weaving community and my fiber community gave me I didn't realize this is what was happening, but it kept me in the world. 'Cause it would have been extremely easy for me. Um, I lean in this direction anyway. I can definitely, like, kinda stay home, like, that's easy for me. Um, but this kept me in the world in a way that I don't know how to describe it except to say I felt really safe and focused and also productive. So I actually made a lot of things in those years and was very productive in those years after my mom died. But it was housed in this safe place. And the amazing thing that happens, and I think people know this all over the world, you put a group of people together that are making stuff, and especially if there's snacks, or what, like, people just start talking, and then you somebody will say something that it's like you think to yourself cosmically, did that person just talk? Did that person's heart just talk to my heart? How did they just said the exact thing? And sometimes people would be saying things. I'm thinking about one person in particular who told a story where, and she was like further out from what I was going through, and I was like, she just gave me a roadmap. Like she doesn't know she just did that, but she did. And so uh, it's like it was like that.
So creating art that reflects something that you've loved or someone that you loved and then lost can be really powerful. I know that from experience. Can you share some examples of art projects or exercises that have resonated with clients, allowing them to express their process and their grief, or even your
Yeah.
own examples?
Yeah, for sure. So I should preface this by saying first that there's two ways that I there's more than two, but there's two main ways that I use fiber art and weaving in particular, um, for both myself and in my work with other people. Right after, like within months after my mom died, I started working with a woman named Susan Barrett Merrill, who developed a she wrote a book called Weaving a Life, and she trains people to be weaving a life leaders. So I went through her program and became certified as a weaving a life leader. And so her what she offers is a series of projects that are all geared towards different um, archetypes, kind of like themes, symbols, and that kind of help get a person in touch with whatever it is that they're going through, as well as how to consciously navigate the road that they're on. So I can talk specifically about those projects. I also have s- with people, we develop projects together. So if someone, I know is a person might come to me and say, whatever it is that they're going through. It could be around loss, it could be around a significant life change, it could be around regret, um, choices, all of these things. So we might develop a project together that reflects, whatever it is that we're trying to communicate. So there's a couple different ways I do it, but I can show you things that I did with Susan and that I've done with a number of people. And first I wanted to show you the loom just to show you how simple um, of a tool that you can have. And so this loom is called the Journey Loom, and Susan actually designed this. And you can see there's a project on it now, kind of experimenting with something on this, but it can fold up and you can carry it with you, and it's a simple frame loom. Um, and so that is just to show, I mean, you can literally find a picture frame in your house too and do weaving on something. It just needs to be a solid structure that can hold tension on threads. Um, One of the projects, it's the one that you really often start with, is called an amulet. And I love this project I love this amulet. When I look at it, I see my mom all over it. There are things in here, like this, and the different yarns and textures that are, they were either things of hers that are woven into this piece, or yarns that I've spun myself, and that, you can probably see there's some wild locks coming out of here and all that. I just, it very much captures her, but it really represents what it is that we're asking for. What are we seeking? And in the process of answering those questions, we develop our amulet that was woven on that loom I just showed you. You can fill it with things that are meaningful to that process. So that's one. Um, Another one, whoops, that is, I hope this shows up on the camera, but this is a mask. that you can actually weave. It's kind of hard to see, but it's like there's eyes and a mouth, and you can weave on that same loom in a way where you can actually manipulate the warp to create shape and create sculpture. And so I've made a lot of these. The mask is all about identity, the disguises that we wear, but also when we have our mask on, what is it that's within us that actually gets to come out, right? Like, so when we can kind of like, I don't want to say hide behind something, but when we've got something that's protecting us, what are we actually in touch with, and what is living within us? So it kind of helps us connect with who we really are at any given time. So those are really fun to make at different stages of life too, and to kind of examine what are we putting out into the world and what's deep inside of us. So that's one of the projects. And then here is the belt of power. I've made a number of these too. And again, this is made on that same loom, just to kind of involves sewing, you know, parts of it together to create the vessel aspect of it. But the belt of power is all about choice. And so that's, you know, I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the road anyway, for most of us, is all the micro and macro choices that we make throughout our lives. And so that's an example of a project that we might do when we're talking about, like, how do I know what road to pick? Where am I going? What am I doing? And so those are just a few examples. There's a number of other ones, but people when you delve into these projects and kind of get into the inquiry that surrounds all of them, when you finally start to weave them, you're not just following directions, you're following the guide of what you came up with in your inquiry. Um, so you end up with some pretty interesting stuff.
Some people might be hesitant to explore art as a means to healing because they don't feel like they're artists. And
Yeah.
even when you're weaving what you've shown us, people might be really hesitant because they're really beautiful, and people might feel insecure about
Yep.
trying something new. How do you address these reservations, and what advice do you have to give someone who wants to begin their journey and use art? And then on top of that, I kind of want you to show that blanket that you made with all the different. Do you have that there? Nothing like surprising you and putting you on the spot here and asking you to.
This is good. I do have it. It's right over there. So can I go get that?
Yes, you can, please,
Okay.
please.
Hang on one second.
And I wanted you to share that because I kind of feel like, I've heard people tell me when I've worked with them about, I have all this stuff of this person I've loved and I don't know what to do with it. And I want to keep some of it, but I just, what do I do with it? And because it is creative and loving and intuitive, but it's also easy.
Yeah. So let me just say this because that is so important. I this is like a disclaimer. I am not a good sewer. Like, I will never make one of those quilts that's like really tight, and has all the angles. There is no way. It's not in my body and in my bones. Um, and so there's something really liberating when you decide, like, I'm just gonna sew stuff together, right? And see what happens and play and let myself just experiment. So I definitely think there's actually like an entry point with, I would say, most artistic mediums where we can all enter at that place. um but this, so I really struggled with that with um my mom's belongings. um that whole topic, we could do a whole separate conversation on, of just what do you do with things that hold, almost everything. I'd be like, well, she's in this. What am I supposed to do? Um, and so what I did with a lot of her things, was make this blanket. And let's see, I'll start. I don't know which, and this is just like a series of, I've got doilies, I've got scarves, I've got this orange. Um, that was a shirt of hers. This was actually my grandmother's. So my mom's mom died just a couple of months before my mom died. Um, so there was like, it was a whole thing. It was a year, I'll tell you. And so my grandmother's in here too. And this was a part. So you can tell looking at this, this is not high and tight, this is a wild piece. I love this blanket. Um, I s this is actively used in my life. It's in a place where I spend a lot of time in my house. Um, Everything I look at on it is meaningful, and it made me feel like, okay, like I don't have to keep a wardrobe full of things. I can take the things that are really precious, and or that have just a softness to them that were important, and turn them into something that is usable and pretty, and that I know all about it. I don't share this with anybody. So this is mine. and yeah, and I think that's a wonderful thing to do. You can do that with blankets, you can make pillows, you can um make scarves, and it's just with simple hand stitching. You don't have to have a sewing machine. What's really nice about hand stitching as opposed to sewing machine, I mean, I love sewing machines for, when they come in handy. But what's really nice too is when you're sitting and hand stitching, you're slowing everything down, and you can just breathe and meditate on a person or meditate on a feeling that you're having. Um, so I've actually done a lot of hand stitching, in as part of the constellation of things that I do now when I'm trying to get grounded or think about whatever it is that I'm chewing on at any given time.
Yeah, there is something to be said with going slow and creating slowly. How can loved ones or caregivers support someone going through grief by encouraging creative expression?
I think what should happen first is that, and I'm saying this because I have this part of myself that I have to talk down when I wish someone would do something, because it'll make them feel better, right? And things will improve. We all want people that we love to feel better and to feel more comfortable and to feel less pain. But I think starting with just the knowledge that, um, we can create an environment where things are possible. We can say, hey, I saw this thing that I thought you might be interested in. But you want to, first is to let go of the idea that you have to do anything or push somebody to do something so that they don't feel the pain that they're feeling, if that makes sense. Like, take the pressure off yourself. That being said, a lot of people, they might not think of it, right? Like, I'm not going to join a weaving class to, you know, work on I don't even know how to weave. I'll get so anxious. Why would I put myself in that situation? So I think just, wondering about it, offering to do it with them. There's a class that I teach at the Shelburne Craft School where, anybody can join it. That's the weaving yours. It's called Weaving Your Story. But people, you can do that with a friend. You can do that with a loved one, and just, and say, just come, let's do this thing together. Um, yeah, so I think just sort of raising awareness, raising just sort of the idea is sometimes enough. Um, so it's tough because sometimes people aren't ready to do it, right?
Yeah.
So you can only kind of plant seeds, create the space to make the opportunities available. Um, and I think just always encouraging anybody, starting with ourselves, to move towards things that we like to look at, that we like, that we're interested in, that we want to feel. And so if we can kind of offer that to our loved ones, who are in pain, I think that's just sort of the number one, the number one thing. And then if you get a, I'm not ready for that, or I can't do that because I don't know how, just, it's okay. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be another entry point. Just means that maybe now is not the time.
Beyond grief, have you explored other emotions and life experiences through art with your clients?
Definitely, yeah. The big ones that come up are, the belt of power reminds me of this. Um, Choice and regret are,
Mhm.
our culture has a major problem with regret. And I I actually think it's something that's really worth spending some time with and thinking about, and letting ourselves be informed by, um, whatever wisdom it might carry. But and we can only do that if we work on trying to understand what it's about. So there's definitely ways or that people have used weaving to explore whatever that issue might be about. I've had people really work over a sense, the sense of home, what home means, which is super interesting. And so using weaving to kind of connect with that. We're in such a, people move all over the world. People are so often living far away from family, that sort of accessing that sense of home within has been something that we've done a lot of. Um, and working through trauma. So a lot of, there's definitely, grief can certainly fit into that around loss, but just all, and also dealing with just things that happen in our life, that you've got life that is going and then something happens. What does that look like? And then there's life, and then so a woven piece that reflects that flow of moments in life has been very powerful. So I'd say those are the three big ones that have come up. Um,
Now, you co authored The Long Grief Journey. What prompted you to write a book about long term grief?
um, Acute grief is that grief that we experience after the death of a loved one. Um, it's, it's the intense stuff. It's the experience of, you know, um, a lot of people struggle with insomnia, with, tearfulness. I mean, that's, tearfulness is putting it lightly. Distractibility, right? Like physical pain. It's when, like, there's a lot of physical symptoms often during this time in grief. Um, it's really when you're in the throes of it, often in shock. Um, and it usually, typically it's considered to be the time, and it lasts anywhere between 6 months to a year following the death of a loved one. So it's really when you're really uncomfortable, like physically, emotionally having a tough time doing the things that are in your day-to-day life. And according to kind of the the literature that's out there, long-term grief is any the or would be anything that's happening after a year, in terms of like the pains of grief, anything that's kind of getting in the way of of you of a person doing their life, right? So I don't it's not that all grief has to end at a year. It's but when things are kind of just when there are aspects of grief that are getting in the way of a person um, living living the life that they want to be living after a year's time. That's when it sort of moves into the long-term grief phase.
I almost feel like it's not that people stop grieving or, those physical parts of the pain of the grief or other parts of grief that they disappear, where so many people believe after a year you should just be over it, or you should be starting to make your way through it. But it's almost like, you have the grief and then you have the coping strategies that bring you to your new normal. And so, does that play a part in that definition of long-term grief?
Absolutely. And yeah, and I can say so the book that Pamela Blair and I wrote, we really we defined for the purposes of our book long-term grief as anything beyond 2 years. Basically, the grieving experience after 2 years of loss. And so and the reason why we did that is that, um, that first year, it's all the firsts. It's just you're just getting through. A lot of times you're getting through the bureaucratic part of death and the restructuring of life sometimes, and just literally, I just think of the first year as survival. That second year is, I think, really surprisingly difficult. I think there is this cultural idea that we're gonna feel better after a year because look, we've gotten through all the first. So now, right, we can I think we're supposed to get on with it, right? And what Pam and I really talked about a lot was that actually that's when you that's when you're really having to figure out how to live without this person. And because the cultural idea has just been sort of internalized that we're supposed to get back to whatever normal is, the grief goes underground. We have it gets just sort of not like stamped down, but it becomes a really private affair. And that's where I think a different kind of pain shows up. That's when it's like, I know I'm supposed to feel better, but I really don't. And I don't know if I can't keep talking about it. Aren't asking me about it. People are sick of hearing about it. And it can become a very lonely affair. Um, so I think that second year, and again, it's not to be like 1 year, 2 year to make it really distinct, but it's confusing. And I think it's really, I know for me, it was very surprising how long it took for me to feel familiar to myself. Um, so long-term grief goes on. Grief is becomes once it sort of enters your life, it's part of your life. And so the coping skills, the living the life that you want to be living, um, in a way that's meaningful and productive, whatever that looks like, creative, whatever that looks like, in relationship, right? Whatever that looks like. That's where, I think it becomes very important to figure out how is grief informing my decisions, how is it impacting me, and how can I work with it? Not to get rid of it, but to be able to um, live with it.
Wow, it's been 45 minutes now. So, as we conclude our conversation, what message or piece of advice would you like to leave with our listeners who might be going through their own grief journeys or supporting others in their healing process?
The first thing that is so important to know is that you are going through a universal, important experience, and that you are not alone, I know sometimes we hear that and it's like, okay, I'm not alone, but I really feel alone and nobody I can't even get close to people right now with the pain that I'm feeling. Um, but I think that knowing that you are on a road and that there are many parts of this road and to take the pressure off yourself to feel like you got to get to some place by a certain time or else there's something wrong, right? That and that th- and that also sometimes if we need help or if we need or want support or if something just is really feeling like heavier than you want it to feel or heavier than something that you want to carry, it's okay. That doesn't mean that there's something um, broken about you or wrong with the kind of experience you're having. Grief is notoriously mind-bogglingly difficult. And I was a therapist for a long time before I experienced the kind of grief that I did when my mom died. And I learned a lot from that. Nothing that I could have learned from a book or from a teacher. You have to go through it. And there are points that you get to where you can look back and say, wow, look what I just went through and look where I am now. Where am I going? So I think just know you're on a long path and there are lots of parts to it. And there's oftentimes people along the way that can help you. And they might not be with you on the whole journey, but they might just sort of hang out with you for a bit and then you'll be on into the next part. So I think I like that visual. It helps me. Um, the other part is, you know, move towards what you're drawn to. I happen to love weaving. I love fiber. I love all the handcrafts, or a lot of them. I don't know all of them. So I'm focused on those because I know that they've helped me and I like to try to share those with people. But um, I think about people who can make amazing food in the kitchen or can do unbelievable things in their gardens or, like keep, you know, just houses looking beautiful and all the different ways that we create beauty around us. That's where your creative self lives. Even listening to music that you love or making music that's, just anything where you feel like you're alive, move towards that. There's no shoulds with this. And you don't have to be an artist in order to make art. You don't have to go to school and get a fine arts degree or, just make something. If you see something beautiful when you're on a walk, notice it. That's your inner artist talking to you because there's something else communicating with you. That's like the best way to start getting in touch with yourself in terms of that other part that sees beauty, because that beauty lives in you, and then you get to hang out with it, and then you get to keep moving in more directions. So I think ultimately that's my number one advice is to know that there's a creative spirit in you and you get to meet it every day if you notice what you like to look at. It just starts with that. Um, so that I think those are my two big things.
Thank you. Bradie, thank you so much for being here today and for, champion the use of fiber arts in the healing process. How can viewers reach you?
I guess the best way is through my website, which is just healinghandcrafting.com. Um, yeah, because there's an email thing on that you can use, and I'll get back to you.
Great. And I'll definitely post that in the description in this video. For our viewers out there, I hope this episode has shed light on the diverse ways we can navigate grief and find healing through art. Remember that grief is a journey unique to each individual, and exploring creative avenues like weaving, hand stitching, knitting, and crochet can offer powerful pathways to understanding and integrating our emotions. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this video to be helpful, Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.